Welcome, welcome, welcome. Tonight is going to be, I'm hoping, a fun night for everybody. I know we've got a fun topic we're going to be talking about. So I have asked a few people to join me, if you will, as being like my main panelists. So I'm going to have them introduce themselves, and I would like everyone else to introduce yourself in the chat box, okay? So, so if we can start with those of you that know who you are. I'm not going to call your name and then ask you to introduce yourself. So, so if you guys could go ahead and start off with that. What I want to just tell everybody your name, your marital status, if you have children, that kind of thing. Okay, just keep it kind of basic. Go ahead.
I'm Jennifer. Tell me what you wanted me to say again, Paul. I'm sorry.
Your marital status?
Single. And I'm divorced. I'm feeling a little bit crazy tonight. Sorry.
That's all right. And then how many children do you have?
I have 3.
Okay.
I got 2 grandbabies on the way.
Awesome. Fun. Okay. Next one.
Hey, I'm Brian. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Brian.
All right, I'm Brian. I am 41. I am both divorced and widowed. And I've got 3 boys, ages 14, 13, and 8. And I live northwest of Atlanta, Georgia.
All right.
Okay, I'm Heidi, and I am never married with 2 children, and I am 40 and live in Mississippi.
Awesome. All right, next.
I'm Fred. Fred Friday. I've been divorced and widowed. I live in Signal Mountain, Tennessee, which is a little bit north of Chattanooga. I have 6 children, and I'm not going to tell you anything else. But I'm still single.
For now, huh?
For now.
Yeah, for now. All right. I think that's. Oh wait, no. Then we got Kelly. All right, Kelly. I think you're the last one. Can you introduce yourself? She's still with us. I don't see her. Okay. So, oh wait, yeah, Kelly. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I just don't. I change over to my computer and.
Oh, okay, no problem. Introduce yourself real quick.
Oh, I'm Kelly. I'm 56. I'm divorced for a few years. I was married for 32 years. I have 4 grown children. 2 of them are married, and I have 7 grandchildren.
Awesome.
I'm eternally happily single.
For now. All right. So awesome. And the rest of you, if you would just if you just do a little intro in the chat box so that we can all kind of know who you are, that'd be awesome. I just don't have time to go through everybody. Okay. So tonight's topic is going to be kind of a fun topic, I'm hoping. And it's also kind of, to me anyway, kind of a special topic of intimacy. When we talk about that, that's like something that the Lord has given us to bring us closer together, to be as one, if you will, when married. And then there's different forms of it that we're going to talk about tonight. But I want to make sure that we keep it on the level of respect, you know, that it needs to be. You know, we're all grown, and just to clarify a couple of things. One is, because we are all members of the church, we want to keep this church related. Oh, by the way, this is Jim again with me, Jim Turner, here in Georgia. He's divorced. And he's letting me know that he's kind of a quiet man, but if he does have anything to share, he will speak up. That's what he's letting me know. Okay. So anyway, when it comes to church standards, we pretty much go by the For Strength of Youth pamphlet, which Elder Holland says is the For Strength of All, right? So we want to make sure that we stay within those bounds and within those guidelines. I know that through the years, some of the wording of that has changed. Some of the wording of our temple experience has changed. So much so that now in dating, if you will, it's referred more to as sexual relations. Like before, it used to be sexual intercourse as part of, whatever with the conversation that we'd talk about. Now it's just sexual relations, because a lot of people tend to justify, if you will, certain things before marriage that are still pushing limits. I'm trying to keep this all integrity based. So yeah, give good politically correct kind of wording, right? But keep it all. Tonight we do want to be real. We are going to get a little vulnerable. Some may share some personal stuff, but we don't want to get too personal. We don't want to get too many details out there. We're not going to go into, let's just say, marriage topics. We are going to go in, we're going to be talking mainly about all the stuff before marriage that we need to talk about, that we need to discuss, that needs to be on the table. But we want to keep it within the realm of church standards. Okay, so we do know that premarital sex, it would be considered against church standards. So that's a given, right? But then there are other things that we're going to talk about a little bit, that are also, let's just say, not meant to happen before marriage. Okay. So I appreciate you guys all introducing yourself, especially in the chat. And as we go throughout tonight, if any of you do have anything you'd like to add in, please feel free. I just know that for the panelists, they have the outline for tonight, that they kind of get the gist of what we're talking about. For some of you, this may be brand new. You didn't know we were talking about this. For those of you, you may have been with me last week and heard me say, hey, this week we're going to be talking about this. So either way, just wherever you're at. But tonight we do want to invite you to be open, to be vulnerable, to be real. We've got some background noise coming from somebody. I don't know. And we are going to be talking about a very sensitive subject, a very special, sacred part of a marriage relationship. So we want to make sure that we just do keep that level of respect. I just want to make sure that we know that. We want to be able to treat it like it was meant to be. Okay. So with that said, I love how Jennifer Williams put it. Jennifer, do you want to share with everybody what you were talking about as far as being stewards of our bodies? Do you remember when we were talking about that?
Well, I feel like that it's our responsibility. I think this is what we're talking. You and I talk about a lot of things. So I think it's our responsibility to determine what is safe and what is right for our bodies, and when it's okay to do those things. We have to set up guidelines for, when things are appropriate for us, and those are important because that will prevent us from doing things that ultimately we don't want to do. So it's our responsibility to be the stewards of our own bodies and have the open discussion with whomever we're dating to make sure that they understand those guidelines and that they are going to live by those guidelines. I think that's what you wanted.
Yes, thank you very much. I love that. That was very eye-opening for me when we had that conversation and she shared that. I'm like, oh, Jennifer, we've totally got to be talking about this, Now, also with that said, some of us are not going to agree with everybody, and that's totally okay. That's part of what I love about the webinars, is that we're not all going to be on the same page. We're not always going to have the same perspective. I think that's what makes these work, is that we do have different perspectives. We're coming from different life experiences. We're coming from different angles in our journeys of singleness, right? and it does really help us to be able to share those different perspectives. All that we ask is that we do that respectfully, not in an argumentative way or whatever, but just share your perspectives and opinions however you feel like you'd want to do it. We also do not ask that you don't bash anybody like your exes or whatever. We don't want to get into that at all either. Okay. All right. So let's talk about different connections that we can feel intimacy with, especially with somebody, that we can feel that closeness, we can feel that connection, right? And we can feel this emotionally. We can feel connected just on some sort of an emotional level. We can feel connected to someone on a spiritual level. Can you give me examples of that, of how you can connect with somebody in those ways? Anybody have an experience or an example of that one?
I think just opening yourself up to be vulnerable. Once you do that, then you get to know someone better. So, just talk about who you are and what you are, and put yourself out there. Right.
Yeah. And to connect, I love that you use the word vulnerable, because that is where you can, when you allow yourself to trust somebody, to share with them something personal that means something to you, that maybe you're holding too close to your heart, and you're sharing that, something emotional, something spiritual, something like that, and you're able to trust that person to do that. That's awesome. That is that connection. Sometimes we can connect with people that are friends that way. We can connect with our children sometimes that way, on a spiritual level or an emotional level or something. But we especially need to be able to do that with the person that we're dating, or that we're wanting, that we're looking at as a perspective, long-term eternal mate or whatever. So so that is something that we definitely want to think about. And I know in all of my studying, research, and books that I've read and whatever, we talk about this a little bit. And there's a lot of women that will complain that men don't talk enough. That and maybe women are wanting more, wanting men to talk more, wanting men to do something more different, whatever that they're expecting them to do. And something that I have learned is that men, when they've reached that height, and men, correct me if I'm wrong. Okay, I could be wrong, but this is what I heard from a couple of men that claim to be experts in this. Okay, so when men feel heightened emotions, like that connection of an emotional connection, or that connection of love, or that connection of spiritual connection, or whatever, but when they feel heightened, they have a tendency more to show action on that. So their love shows up more in actions than it does in words. What do you think, guys?
It sounds about right.
Sounds about right.
I would say that's.
What do you mean by actions, Paula?
So it could be actions. So like some men may want to say, go vacuum the house for a woman, to go wash dishes. They're going to go wash a car. They're going to go make sure the gas tank's filled up, do whatever. But then it could also be in the intimacy realm, hugging, the kissing, the sexual part of marriage, right? It could be any form of action that they take to show that bond. Have you thought about that any? Whereas women, go ahead.
I think generally speaking, that's the case, but I mean, it just depends on the individual person. I mean,
sure.
I would say there's more men than women that are that way, and I think there's some women that are that way, as well. But yeah, I think generally speaking.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. All right. I do know that there are men that are very vocal, that are happy to express feelings in words and whatever. But I also, I've also seen it more in more action-oriented type thing. Okay, and a lot of times it's just because men and women think and act differently when they have those feelings of love. Women are more emotional generally. They do have a greater tendency to put more into words, or more into some sort of a feeling, right? And when we talk about expressing feelings of love or expressing those feelings or even acts of intimacy, when it comes to expressing that love and creating those feelings, if you're a woman or a man that has a tendency to see the negative side of things in people, yourself, or whatever, so let's say you see the negative in the other person, you just express that to them a lot. Do you think they're going to want to be around you more? Would you want to be around somebody that's just letting you know all of your flaws a lot?
I wouldn't.
I know, right? Most of us would not.
That's an easy one for me. We couldn't get that anywhere.
I know, right?
So what we're looking for is someone that does just the opposite, makes us feel good, and we want to make them feel better. And anybody that's really, in my opinion, anybody that's breaking someone else down for any reason, I don't mean disagreements, but just breaking them down, being critical of whatever, they got a problem. And just exit, go somewhere else. Next, that kind of thing.
Yeah, right.
Can I give a little clarity to how men and women think differently?
Sure, go ahead.
So they did a study in '98. It was a medical university study, and they put men and women in these two groups in MRI machines, and they would ask them these pseudo-rhyming words, and then see how they processed in the brain. They found that men are logical thinkers. They only processed language in the left hemisphere of their brain, and the women process language in the left and right, which is the creative side. So when men and women say, you can say the exact same sentence, men are going to process it with one hemisphere, so the language is simpler. Women are going to attach emotion, color, feelings, past experiences, all these different things to the same thing. So you can be talking to someone and say, what do you think about that? And you might get a totally different response than you think you would have because you processed it totally differently. That's where the conversation and breaking it down to try and understand, hey, what did you get out of this? This is what I got out of it. And then coming to a medium where, oh, we think this way differently. And I don't know, do you have any?
You did great.
So
Awesome.
just understand it's totally different.
Right.
Yeah.
Women are way ahead of the curve than men, so we're trying to catch up.
It's okay. It made me think of an example I was given a few years ago with football. So there were women or men that would complain sometimes that their wives didn't want to watch football with them. And so they were given the challenge to tell their wives something about a couple of the players and their families and their children and what they do with a nonprofit organization or what they do for fun, or get them emotionally attached to the players and their family. And then the wife started wanting to be involved with football because it was attached to a feeling. It was like, oh, was that the guy that did da-da-da-da? Oh, I hope he's able to get that touchdown. You know what I mean? It's like all of a sudden then they want to start cheering for that guy because he was this great family man with all these kids and did this great stuff for the community and whatever. So that's just a side bit, because some guys here, have that great connection with football or, some sport of some kind. So sometimes that can help get them more involved if you get an emotion attached to it or get that relationship attached to it, because that's where women are. Women are generally more attached to their relationships and to their feelings about different things.
My mother watches the Warriors because she loves Steph Curry and how he stood up for his daughter. And I don't think she watches any other basketball ever. Mm-hmm. But I was going to say a minute ago, I think the biggest thing that we're all talking about here is, even if you're not going to get married or, you're just spending hopefully quality time together, that you communicate, this is what it means to me when you do this, or, you just get it out there instead of having your feelings hurt or getting offended by something you think somebody said that was rude or whatever, but just talk to them about it. I don't know. I mean, that's also, I was married to a man with Asperger's, and social cues are not their strong point. Social interactions are not their strong point. So he hurt my feelings a whole lot. And looking back at it, of course, you know, hindsight's 2020. I could have said, when you do that, you hurt my feelings, or, you know, and I'm sure he would have been better about it. But so now that I'm an old lady, if I came across that, I've learned a few lessons, and I can, you know, anyway, I just think it's really important for us to communicate with each other rather than just taking offense.
Totally, but let's clarify that communication, because in that communication, it's how we make the other person feel and what our intentions are of making them feel. So if somebody comes across sarcastic and demeaning, the communication may be there, but how we're communicating is not going to be great. So a lot of times people tend to detach themselves emotionally, that connection's not there when they don't feel good around that person. It's more like a repelling act versus an attraction, okay? So how you feel being around that other person is going to matter way more than anything else, because that underlying feeling that you have with that person that you're with is going to be pretty huge. All right, now let's talk more nitty-gritty. Let's get into boundaries. Let's get into expectations. Let's get into a few other things. In a little bit, we're also gonna have a list of questions that really need to be discussed when you're seriously dating somebody, or even engaged, or, you know, whatever. To be able to communicate with them. So, boundaries. There are, let's just say, some experiences I've had that I'm going to share in very general and vague terms, of a few bad examples of, let's just say, bringing up topics of intimacy. It has been my experience, and I'm not saying that this is the case with everybody, but it has been my experience that most men that bring up the topic of sex right away generally have some sort of a porn or a sex addiction. I'm not saying they all do, but generally speaking, beware. And I had an experience one time where I met a man at a dance. This was years ago. I haven't seen him in a long time. But I met him at a dance. He got my number. We started talking on the phone a little bit, and we had set up a time for us to get. He lived in another state. We had set up a time for us to get together and go out. And on my way traveling down, I had one of my oldest sons traveling with me. On my way down, he had called me and he said, "Hey, I have a question for you." And I'm like, "Okay, ask," you know, because I usually try to be pretty open. And he said he was telling me that this is like really important to him in a marriage, and that he's found that that when this isn't the case, that it's a deal breaker kind of thing. Now, granted, we had only been talking on the phone. There was no date involved yet, that kind of thing. And he said, "Do you like oral sex?" And I was like, wait a minute. So, but he let me know that if the answer was not correct, that we would not be compatible. I'm like, oh no, it didn't matter what my answer is. We're not going to be compatible because there's a boundary issue here. You know, there are certain boundaries of when to bring up topics, when to discuss certain things, and when to place those expectations. We had issues before the first date. I knew it wasn't going to work because of the importance he was placing on one aspect of a relationship that he didn't even know who I was, right? Like he hadn't spent any time with me, find out the woman I was, to find out if he even wanted to have a relationship with me. And so because of that, I was like, I just know we're not compatible, because your priorities are way different than mine. And so that's one bad example. Another one, I do have some good examples. I'm just going to share with you the whole boundary thing, you don't bring this up on a first date or before a first date, right? That's just not appropriate. Another one I had, went out with a guy to dinner. Again, I was on a business trip, met him there for dinner. And he starts telling me about his marriage and all the problems, which again, we've talked before about oversharing and how not to do that on first date. but anyway, but he goes into telling me about an issue he's got with porn, and that's not really an addiction because he just uses it as a release, and that after he's married, it'll fix it all. And I was like, again, I'm like, dude, we got way more issues here because I've been there, done that, got 3 t-shirts. I'm not doing that again, I'm like, so, I was very nice, it was very cordial. I listened to him spill his story and talk about all the issues that he had. And it was the divorce was still pretty new for him. And it was still, still in that phase of, you feel like you got to bomb at your story all the time. Right. So, super nice guy, but not somebody that I knew I was going to have a relationship with, because he was at a point where I wasn't going to go. Not to say some other woman wouldn't be perfect for him, but it just wasn't going to be me. Do not bring that up on a first date. Just don't do it. The first date should be the Ford, the family, occupation, recreation, and dreams. Stick with that. You're good. Don't be bringing up all the other stuff. That comes in time. Had another guy I went out with to share with me how he'd been married multiple times, cheated on his wife a couple of times, or the wives a couple of times, and he ended up with an STD. And I'm just like, again, dude, it's like, this is information you need to be sharing with somebody that you're going to seriously be dating and considering for marriage. Now, with that said,
can I interject?
Go ahead.
Now, in all 3 of the instances that you've just cited, aren't you happy that they told you that beforehand? You didn't have to waste any time being involved with this.
Right. So that was going to be my next topic. Thank you, Pat. Okay. You're awesome. So I was going to be discussing that in just a minute. Okay. So right here on my notes, Jim will attest, I have timing right here, right? So when do we time stuff like that? Do we need to tell, because some people do feel like, there was a lady at our conference who spoke up. I can't remember her name, but she wasn't on our panel, but she was just in the audience. And she was like, okay, but I've got stuff that I want them to know up front. Okay. I've got stuff that I want them to know up front. And when should I tell them that? So let's talk about this. When would have been the appropriate time to bring up these topics? Did they, for me, it was fine because I was like, okay, we're good, but if they want to do that to get rid of me, we're good, right? They did a great job on that one. But to keep somebody, would that keep the right person? So let's talk about this for a minute, because this is something that we really need to talk about. It's been a little warm. All right, come on.
Okay, I'll speak up here. Or is Jennifer going to speak up?
Jennifer, you have something to say?
Well, I was just going to speak because nobody else was. I just think it's really important that you kind of have not an outline, but kind of have a timeline that you feel is appropriate. And then if you have a stronger connection with somebody on that physical and emotional and spiritual level that warrants maybe moving a little faster than you normally would, I think that timeline could be adjusted for that. But I think unless that connection is there, sticking to a timeline is important, because then you're not like sharing all of your business. Like, it's not, and I appreciate what Pat was saying. Yes, it was good that you found out right away, because then that allowed you to know that that person was not for you. But there may have, I don't know, there may have been just a better way of doing that. At that point, maybe the connection would have been a little bit different, and I don't know, you could have felt differently. I don't know. But for me, I think an appropriate time limit to talk about that is when you feel like whatever that timeline is. So to me, I've blown my timelines out the water since I've been with Jonathan. It just has not made any sense at all, but I'm okay with that.
Amen, sister. I totally get that.
It is what it is. So my normal timeline is gone. But it's been when we have felt like, okay, this is something that we want to make exclusive. Okay, so now we talk about these things. Okay, this is, something that we want to look into making a long-term relationship. We talk about more things. And then as the relationship progresses and we go to the next level, we talk about more and more things. So my timeline that I had for myself, the hard, fast timeline that I had for myself, gone. But I think that it's important that as we hit certain levels or several or what's the word I'm looking for, platforms or milestones. Thank you for that. The milestones, that it's then at those points that we share more information.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, because there are times, Jennifer and I have been friends for a while, and we've been doing these webinars too for the year, and it's just different discussions we've had about as far as timelines go and discussing things. But I love that. That's why I bring up the emotional and spiritual connection first, because you need those two connections to really bring up those other topics. Without those two connections, it's going to bomb. It's like saying, I'm here telling you this so you won't come back. Am I right? Right? I mean, you've got to have that.
I agree with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that some people are testing the waters by putting that information out there, too. I don't know. I mean, maybe just my guess. I don't think they're putting it out there to run you off, but to see if it will run you off. Is she strong enough to handle my past? If she's not, then I don't even really want to pursue this. So I don't know. I mean, but I know that we all have quote unquote lists, and I've heard people say, ditch the list. We have to have our outline at least of our list. But I was talking to a friend last night, and he said, this girl had kids, and so this guy said he didn't want kids, so they've split up, and then he went off and married a woman with 7 kids. And I said, well, that she wasn't the one for him, so I mean, maybe but his point was, we just throw away all everything goes out the window if you form this bond, this connection. Kind of what you're saying, Jennifer, but not really. But you find the right one, and then you're like, oh, I didn't really need all those caveats or whatever.
For real, right? I've always said, I've got 5 whammies. That if I wanted to get rid of a man, I'd dump it right there. Bam, 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 bam. They're gone. Right? There was no emotional connection. There's no spiritual connection. They're like, whoo, too much stuff. I'm heading out. Right? So what I have done is when I've dated somebody that I think may go somewhere I don't know, I have shared a little bit of time, and now I've got it in steps. I share one. If they can't handle that one, it don't matter about the rest. Okay? Because I usually start off with the easy one. And if that's too much for them, then I'm like, yeah, it's not going to go anywhere. And I've had people stop me there. I've had probably 70% of the men that I dated stop me at the first one. They can't deal. And it was the fact that I had a son with Asperger's. So I'm like, if you can't handle that, you're not going to be able to handle the other 4. It won't matter. Right? So what I've done, though, is I paste it, and and it depends on the connection that I feel like I have, or that I feel like I need to have with that man, kind of thing, to be able to share those things. And some hear all 5, some don't. But like with Jim, I went faster than what I've done in the past because we had more of a connection, and like that emotional, spiritual connection first, and so that was a lot easier to be able to do that. So that's kind of what I'm getting at with the timing thing. Without that connection, that emotional, spiritual connection that's there, and it's more of a feeling. It's more of something where you just kind of feel a mutual thing of that sort of depth, if you will. Otherwise, there's no glue. Maybe that emotional, spiritual connection acts as kind of a glue to that relationship. There's nothing there to adhese that, nothing there to build on when you hit it up with the whammies. It just kind of blows it away. So I can appreciate the whole timeline thing. So
Hey, Paula.
yeah, go ahead.
I think as we develop a relationship with someone, we can accept more of the challenges that might be with that relative to family members. I have a son that still lives with me, and which has been a challenge. So I think, like you said, before we throw it all out on the table, let's see if we're a connection. We have some common interests, some chemistry, if you will, maybe, or I think we have to try not to scare people off or say, well, they won't like me because I've got a son that lives with me.
Right.
And so I just think that to be very careful sharing too much early on, because your one's willingness to accept challenges. For example, all of my kids are grown and out of the house except for the one. And so I'm not interested in being involved with anybody with any young kids. But as time goes on, you might change that. I'll give you a crazy example. When my late wife, we talked about having additional children, and we agreed that we didn't need any more children. I had 4, she had 1. And guess what?
Yeah.
About 6 months in, said, I think we really do need more children. Now, had she told me that day one, of course, I don't think she was lying. I think she just changed her mind or whatever. And women never do that, though, never change their mind. Neither do men, neither. But had she said, no, I think we should have a child together, I don't know how I would have reacted to that. So I don't know whether Spirit told her not to tell me, or I know she wasn't. I don't think she was being dishonest with me. But I think as we become more involved with an individual, I think our willingness to support them where they are and where they've been grows. Does that make any sense?
Mm-hmm. Right, exactly. Which is exactly what I'm getting at with the whole connection thing. When you've got that connection, you can add in the whammies or the things that you think are more challenges to deal with in your life, and then it's fine. But wait for that connection. Wait for that trust and that vulnerability to be there to be able to start adding those in.
Can I?
Yeah.
So we always look for a proving ground, right, in these relationships to see if they'll hold up to our expectations or whatnot. So we all do it in some way or another. I just wanted to share the interesting thing that happened with Jennifer and I when we started to have some hard talks and had discussions about things we may have not understood about each other. We had an intimate conversation, and it was a hard conversation, and it ended up proving to me that I felt more affection and more gratitude for her than I thought I was going to feel. And it bonded me to her that we could have this deep, intimate, personal conversation about things that were hard. So it was a proving ground. It was a beautiful opportunity to grow that spiritual connection in a hard way, but it wasn't hard because it worked out perfectly.
Awesome. That's so great. Thank you for sharing that. That's great. All right. So, so we've talked about a little bit of the timing of when to bring up some of the tough stuff, okay? And generally, if you'll just wait for that connection and then add it on a little bit at a time, kind of like planting a seed, right? Like you're gonna that emotional and spiritual connection could be the nutrients in the dirt that you're gonna plant that seed in. You're planting that seed in there, and you're feeling that connection, right? It's bonding with the dirt and the ground, and then you're gonna start adding a little bit of water, a little bit of sunlight, a little bit of fertilizer. Because if you dump it all on in the beginning, it may not thrive. I'm not saying it won't, but it may not. So if you do it a little bit at a time and keep that connection, keep that foundation going, and then it'll be much better to bloom, a lot easier. It will just take off and it will thrive. All right, so let's talk a little bit about boundaries. Let's talk a little bit about PDA. Let's talk a little bit about the dating intimacy of like hand holding, kissing, that kind of thing. Let me give you a personal example of me early on. So earlier on, and some of you know what I've been through, some of you don't, that's okay. So earlier on, I had this rule that I was going to have a man wait 5 dates to hold my hand, to kiss me, to anything, because I wanted him to take the time to get to know me first. Well, through the years, that has gone out the window. And I've had men argue this with me. Oh my goodness, the arguments some men have had with me on this. Now, through the years, it did go out the window. But it took a little bit for me to trust me and my instincts of somebody like that. Because one of the things I had learned years ago from a therapist was that one of the signs of an abuser or an addict or a controlling man was somebody that would come on super strong in the beginning physically, and then like call you all the time, multiple times every day, and just always wanting to be, catching up, checking on you and whatever. And so I was leery of that, right? So I found that that's not always the case with people, with men. It just depends on their personalities and who they are and whatever. But let's talk about that. When would be an appropriate time to start holding hands, to start, kissing in the relationship or that type of thing? Anybody have any thoughts on that?
I think the first date is too soon for any of that. I mean, just for me personally.
You think
For
what?
like the first date is too soon for any of that for me personally, like kissing or holding hands.
Okay.
So I think like after the second date, it's however close you feel to that person, but everybody has different comfort levels as to what works for them.
Okay.
Awesome. I think you can ruin a possible good thing by kissing right away. Just I had somebody tell me that at Lake Lanier, somebody kissed her, just like they weren't on a date or anything. They went for a walk. He kissed her, and she said it really turned her off. And then there was somebody else that she had kissed. It was a really good kisser. Now you can imagine this person is very young. Half my age probably, anyway, not quite, but anyway, so can you tell from a kiss, oh no, I don't want to have anything to do with him because he forced this kiss on me and it was horrible, or, oh, that was the best kiss I've ever had. I've got to, we've got to be, there's something there to that relationship, like you're saying, there's so much more to it that needs to be established first, because if you start with the physical, you don't know what else is there. I don't know. That's just my opinion.
Okay. Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. All right, Brian, I'm going to ask you in a minute to talk about the relationship attachment model for those that haven't heard it yet, if you don't mind doing that. But before we get to that, does anyone else have any other thoughts on that? Any other opinions?
Well, I wanted to say this about the physical touch. I've been reading myself, from different things about it. And one thing that this therapist said was that when physical touch comes first, that's going to bond you immediately, and you're going to think it's love. And then feel like you're bonded with love because of the intimate touch, the physical touch flags. You're gonna make excuses, and you're going to eventually fill in the voids for them as potential. Like there's always hope for them to be what you want them to be by going too fast. And that like resonated big time with me because my color blue. So I've got the color blue for like physical touch. I'm gonna bond immediately through physical touch. And I've noticed that in my past relationships that if I do that, then I am going to ignore the red flags, and I'm going to push all the other things away, and I'm going to start making them into the person that I think they could be or should be, and then just end up settling, which has been my experience. So my question would be, and we may get to this later, I don't know, how do you go from that when that's your pattern? Like that's my pattern, physical first or too fast, to following these steps. Like my mind's over here being blown. Like how do I do that? How do I know if I'm going to make the right step? Or when is it too much? When is it not enough? When is it time? Like how? Oh my gosh, it's crazy. So anyway, that would be my question.
Okay. Well, we can talk about that now. And I know part of that's not only just your personality type, but also your love language. For those of you who've not done love languages before, you can go to love language. I think it's just love languages or 5 love languages, something like that. 5lovelanguages.com, and take that test and find out what your love language is. For some of us, it is physical touch that's number one. And that touch expresses that love. So I totally get that. I'm that way. That touch is like, it just, it sends like a surge almost through the body of that feeling that everybody loves to feel, right? So, yeah. And I love how, some of you are bringing in the topics of rushing that relationship, or how much you're doing that or whatever. And I think it was Pat one time, he actually shared that lust rushes, love waits. Am I saying that right? Lust rushes, love waits. And so it's not even just about the hand holding or the kissing, but it's even about just getting married really fast. Because in the church, a lot of people get married fast because they want to have sex without losing a temple recommend, right? And a lot of times if you can wait, that shows more of a truer love connection than it does a lust connection. Make sense? Hope that makes sense to you. So
I think that shows a level of commitment.
Right. Totally. Yeah. Great. All right. So so when it comes to those boundaries, Jennifer, do you have any insight on what Heidi was asking?
I do.
I know us three share a little bond here, so I'm thinking we can speak each other's language.
So one of the things that I have, that I've kind of a rule that I've made is that I take it a lot slower with the physical part of it, just because I do want to keep my temple recommend, and I also agree with Heidi. I think that it could not have been any more well put than what she said, that we build this connection that allows us to ignore, because that physical, Jonathan and I talk about all the time, it's that oxytocin that you feel when is released when you are around someone that you care about and they touch you. And it's a powerful drug. And you have to be very careful with that. And you're not talking about bad things, just holding hands can do that. I mean, and so you've got to be really careful with that. And so I know for me personally, I like to wait at least a month or two before I am ready to kiss a guy, just because it's difficult for me. I enjoy touch a lot. and I'm not willing to allow that fog to come over me, or so to speak. That's what I call it, is that fog that doesn't allow me to see the real them. And you and I've talked, Paula, and actually you, me, and Heidi have all talked about how that first 3 months is that honeymoon period. And if we can't get through that without having some of that, you know, kissing and that kind of thing, we're going to lose it. We're going to be in a fog.
Okay, but I think I can do this. I think I'm okay.
Yeah,
I hope so.
But yeah, so I think if we kind of put that boundary on there and just really focus in on the those spiritual and emotional connections that you were talking about, let that be our focus, and let's not focus in on the physical connection, because if the other two are there, the physical is going to come.
Right. Totally.
So
Totally.
that would be my advice, Heidi.
And Heidi, just so you know, and this is for everybody, actually, not just Heidi, but just Heidi asked the question. Something that I have learned is that the woman controls the pace of the relationship. We say when, you know, or how far they go or whatever. A lot of women sadly think that they have to lower their standards to keep a man, when actually the opposite is true. When a woman has standards, and not a controlling thing, but just has standards that he has to live up to, he will live up to the standards if that's the woman he wants. Anybody want to disagree with that? Or not disagree. Anybody else have any other opinion on that? Sorry,
I have an opinion on that.
Okay, good.
For me personally, I agree with you. I think men are very attracted to women with standards, but I can only speak for me. I am also very attracted to men that have high standards.
Amen. Right. Amen, amen, amen. Definitely. Well, you know, if they're into us, they're going to have high standards, right? That's going to say something right there. All right. So just keep that in mind, is that men will marry a woman with standards. Generally they'll only date a woman with lower standards, but they'll marry somebody with higher standards and to live up to. As long as they don't come across controlling, demeaning, whatever. I mean, like standards as in they know who they are, they know what their expectations are, they know what to live up to, that kind of thing. Then it'll all be good. So let's talk about some good examples of how this works. And I don't know there's a perfect relationship on this. Let me just clarify this, because we could say, okay, in this timeline of a month or this timeline of 2 months, but really each relationship is individual and unique. And when you have that connection, you can feel the inspiration of what to do with that relationship. Okay? And not all relationships are going to work out. Some of the men that I've dated were in my life to teach me something, or maybe I needed or they needed to learn something from me. Not all relationships are going to work out. I have really good friends that I've gone out with before, and I think they're awesome people, but it just wasn't for me. We just didn't work out. That makes sense? So like just because we do that, it doesn't mean that that everything's going to work out a certain way. But either way, though, you've got to form that type of connection, and you may not always know the timeline involved. And generally, though, within the first 3 months, like Jennifer brought up, within the first 3 months, you're going to know if this is going to be a long-term relationship or not. For me, it's been less than 3 months. I can tell if it's going to be a long-term relationship or not, because I haven't made it to 3 months with anybody in the past. So generally it's been like, you know, like within a timeline, you're gonna figure it out, because you've got to experience certain things together. But just be open to the possibilities. Be open to whatever the Lord has in store for you in His timeline, in His time frame. Okay. So, any other comments on touch?
Paula, there was a moment in time where you asked Brian to say something.
Yes. Yep. I was going to get to that
Can we
now.
go back to that? Okay, sorry.
Yep.
I was
So I just
interrupting.
want to make sure we didn't
I
have
saw
any
his
comments.
mind reeling.
Yeah, no,
I
no,
saw
that's
his
okay.
mind reeling, so I was like, I really want to hear what he's thinking.
All right. So, yeah. So, Brian Kellogg, the relationship attachment model. Do you have those steps for us again?
Yeah. So
I love
before I get
talking
into
about it.
that, I'm going to talk about the touch thing real quick.
Okay, good. Go ahead.
Like personally, for me, holding hands is not that big of a deal. It's something that's nice. It's not, I don't know, it's not the same as kissing. It's not even in the same universe. I mean, if we can't hold hands, then we better all quit dancing, because you're holding hands and have your arm around somebody while you dance. You barely even know them. You know, I mean, if you don't equate in your mind that holding hands means you're in a relationship, like it's just something nice that you can do on a date, you know. But I absolutely agree on kissing. Once you kiss somebody, it can definitely cloud your judgment and all that. But relationship attachment model, basically the way it works, there's 5 levels. And it's, if you think about it, it's like, you know, on a stereo, you've got your different equalizers, like the little levers for like bass and treble and all that. So imagine you've got 5 of those little sliding levers there. And so the goal of this is basically to keep them in order. Keep the first one higher than the second, higher than the third, higher than the fourth, and higher than the fifth. So the first one is know, meaning know who the person is, get to know them. You know, we talk about the Ford model, you know, their interests, their family, all that kind of thing. You know, and then obviously it moves on to more spiritual things, more emotional things, history, all that kind of stuff. So know. And then the second one is trust, meaning trust that they're telling the truth, trust that they are who they say they are. And you gain that through getting to know them, you know, through talking and like in-person interactions as well. And then, you know, you can begin to trust them. Then the third one is commit. And that is where you make commitments and expect the other person to keep them. Like if you say, hey, can you call me at 6? And they're like, all right, I'll call you at 6. Do they call you at 6? You know? So making those commitments. And then the fourth one is kind of related to that. It's rely. So is that person somebody you can rely on? If you tell them a secret, do they share that with anybody? If you, say that you need something from them, you know, are they able to accommodate you? You know, are you a priority for them to where you can rely on them? And then the fifth one is touch. And that's, you know, basically any form of physical touch. So it's got to be, you know, kind of in that scale. So you want to know them more than you trust them, more than you commit to them, more than you rely on them, and more than you touch. So that's how the relationship attachment model works. And so all those 5 facets kind of work together to build your relationship with somebody.
Right. And is there a certain timeline with all of those?
It's not a certain timeline, because everybody's timeline is different. You know, it's just like anything else in life. It's about what you're willing to invest in time and emotionally. You know, if you're going out on one date every 2 or 3 weeks and talking for a few minutes on the phone a couple other times in between, it's going to go a lot slower than if you are texting and FaceTiming every day and going out 2 times a week. You know, it's just depends on what you're putting into the relationship. You know, some people are really busy or just want to move at a much slower pace. Personally, I'm pretty fast. I'd rather know in 2 or 3 weeks if something's going to go somewhere than spend 6 or 8 months on it. You know, that's just me. It's just the way I am, you know? So there's not a hard and fast timeline. It's just about keeping that relationship in the proper order.
Awesome. I think a lot of people are that way, especially a lot of men, I think, are that way, where they want to just figure out, from the start. There are some people that just do get kind of frustrated with the process because they want to know the end from the beginning, and they can't always know that. And then there's a misconception, and we're going to get into some other questions that need to be discussed before you were to get married. Now, you do not have to write all these down. I am going to email you the Word document that has it, or share with you the Google Doc or whatever I can get it on. But I'll share with you these list of questions. But there are certain questions that need to be asked before you were to marry somebody. And tonight we're just going to talk about the questions with intimacy. There's so many other questions that need to be talked about, so many other topics that need to be discussed. So this is just some of them. If you want, I've got a list of 375 questions, and this is just a few of them. If you want the whole list, let me know. I can send the whole list, but for this one, I'm just going to send you this list. So if you get this email and you want the whole list, just let me know. But I'm going to start off because there's a misconception or a myth or whatever you want to call it that that women do not enjoy, let's just say, the sexual part of marriage. And I'm here to tell you that's just not true. I've got several friends, and I know of other women that I think some of us enjoy it as much, if not more, than the men do. But again, within the bounds of marriage and in the Lord's way. It is, or the Lord's time frame, anyway. I don't know about the Lord's way, but in the Lord's time frame, there's a time and a place for everything. And to keep it real, this is why for some people, it's really important that we have those boundaries. Know what your boundaries are. Know what your buttons are. There are certain things a man's not going to do to me while we're dating because I know what that's going to do to me. And so I'm like, it's just not going to happen. That's going to wait. And so that's why I'm saying that as women, I mean, men can do it too, but we help pace that so that we make it till we're married. If that man wants to be with us, they're gonna live up to those standards. Okay. So for now, let's talk about those questions. So some of the questions that need to be asked are questions like, what were your parents' attitudes about sex? Did they discuss it openly, or was the subject taboo? Did you get the feeling that your parents were happy with their sexual relationship or no? Now, I don't know if you want to go into too much detail about your parents' stuff, but for a lot of people, they do feel like, I don't know if we should talk about this, right? And my kids grew up with this being a topic at our dinner table. It's kind of funny because I was having a team meeting, and one of my married sons is on my team that I work with from home, and somehow we got off on the topic of one of the oils that we work with this, and they were just kind of joking around about it, and they're like, wait a minute, it might be making Jeremy feel uncomfortable, and he's like, oh no, we've talked about this so much, it's all good. It's like when you can be more open about it, they're less likely to do something not needing to be done, shall we say, or push limits or whatever. So at least that has been my experience, is that when the openness is there, then that tends to be just a much better situation for families. Anybody else have any comments on that? All right, next question is, do you feel comfortable discussing sexual topics, saying words related to sex and sexual anatomy? Again, you want to make sure that you're at a point where you feel comfortable with this, where you're good with keeping this real, and you've been dating for however long you feel like you need to be dating, and you're at a point of being seriously dating, or exclusive, some people call it, or engaged or whatever. Okay, these are some topics that just is not first date discussion. Do you think each spouse has a right to demand sexual intimacy from the other? Who should decide how often a couple is sexually intimate, and who should initiate intimacy? That's why I led with the thing about some people think that women don't enjoy this. I know a lot of women that do. So, you know, and again, this is just something that needs to be talked about. We need to be very open about this. If you guys have any comments on any of this, or feel like you need to add to the question or clarify anything, please let me know. Another question is, have you ever viewed pornography intentionally? I love that clarification. Okay. This to me is a hot topic and a sensitive topic. Pornography is the reason I am single. It's the reason my kids and I have gone through all the hell we've gone through. And so for me, that's huge. And I can tell you that is a discussion that I have with men that I have dated, you know, any length of time. That is, it's something that does need to be discussed. And this isn't just for men. It's women too. There are women that also have viewed pornography intentionally. So do not assume that this is just a man thing. It is also a woman thing for some women. Okay?
Hey, Paula, I recently heard a statistic from the missionary department, and it's something like, it's some astronomically high, like 82% or something like that of young men, and 30-something% of young women have viewed pornography intentionally. You know, they've repented of it properly and everything, but, you know, have felt that struggle before even their mission. So it's a very real problem, you know.
Right.
And,
it is
definitely something that needs to be talked about. And while I'm talking, I might as well say, your point about, you know, women enjoying sex as well. I find, and again, we've been talking in some generalizations, but generally speaking, I think the women that don't appreciate sex as much are the ones that got married young and haven't gained an appreciation about it. Whereas those who have either not been married for, you know, yet, and are, you know, in the single adult age range, or have been married before and know what they're missing, are the ones that, you know, gained a greater appreciation for that intimacy. I think, you know, it's just from personal experience, you know, being, you know, somebody that got married young, and all the people that I knew, that seems to be more of a theme there than it is, you know, an older age and with more experience in life in general. You know?
right. I think some of that too could come from their perspective or their experience in growing up. Like if the parents did treat it like a taboo thing, or like it was a dirty thing, or it was a naughty thing to do, or whatever, you know, then the mindset toward it has to be overcome. So I totally get what you're saying. It could also be the whole experience or the expectations from the other spouse. If they had an experience where it was demanded versus gone about in a loving way. Because there's a difference between sex and making love, right? There's a difference between that intimacy level. And if someone can express that in a way that connection is there, that feeling is there, then yeah, it does make a huge difference. Okay. Thank you for sharing that. That's awesome. All right. And for those that this applies to, what are your feelings about birth control? Do you think it's right or wrong? What types of birth control would you feel comfortable using, if any? What was that?
Can we back up for just a second?
Yeah, go ahead.
I said, can we back up for just a second?
No problem.
When you were talking about when you were talking about looking at porn intently, with intent, is a complete deal breaker for everyone? Should that be a deal breaker if they have intentionally looked at it?
That they have intentionally looked at it. All right.
Yeah, should that be a deal breaker
Oh, no. I mean, that's my opinion. Oh, I shouldn't have said that. Try to avoid groupthink, people. So I try to go, oh, what do you guys think first?
Well, I think it shouldn't be a deal breaker across the board. I think that's everybody's own choice. You know, if somebody has, got divorced because their spouse used porn, and that caused a, fracture, you may not want to put yourself back in that position. I mean, and it depends on how the person's handling it too. I mean, there's a lot of factors there. I don't think it should be a blanket, rejection. It's case by case, really, like everything else in life.
Thank you, Brian.
Okay, anyone else have any other thoughts on that question?
At what point, I mean, I'm thinking, have you viewed porn intentionally before? I mean, maybe yes, but just enough to see that wasn't your thing? Or, I mean, because that's a pretty broad question.
Right.
So,
right, because it opens up a discussion.
Yeah. So I'm saying, just so it's not a yes or no answer.
Right.
Is what I'm saying. It's
awesome.
Like it could be, oh yeah, I mean, like you said, it opens it up. So you can't say, oh well, the answer to that is a deal breaker. Not yes or no is a deal breaker, but the depth, where it takes you to could be, or a deal breaker. Like Brian said, depending on the person's past. But again, nothing is set in stone here. I mean, somebody could have, if they're 50 years old and when they were a teenager, they had to do something before they went on their mission because they had an issue that, I mean, there's so many different situations.
Right. Thank you so much for clarifying that. Everybody does have their own story, their own experiences. There are a lot of people that have battled the porn addiction and have overcome it. They've gone through the addiction recovery program. The atonement is real. And we've got to keep that in mind, that just because someone did this in their past doesn't mean they're going to bring it to the future. And I always ask, and I go a little bit more specific, and I don't even remember all the questions, but we'll talk about this now, and if it comes up later, let me know. But if they say yes, and I want to find out first, how long ago? When was the last time? Because if it was last week, we're not going to keep seeing each other, right? But if it was years ago, that's a different conversation, right? Also, I want to know what type of porn. Sadly, because of my experience, I know that there's different porn out there that is beyond sickening. And so I want to know what type of porn that they're doing, because that's going to matter more to me than if they did porn. Does that make sense? If their porn was grown women and they dealt with it a few years ago, moving on. We're good. We're still good. We can still go out, right? But if their porn was child porn, we are so done. I can't even tell you how done we are. That makes sense? So it just depends on so many different clarifications. Now that's my opinion, and I have a strong opinion based on my life experiences, okay? But that doesn't mean that you have to take on my opinion, because your life experiences could be completely different. And the way that you're going about it is so different. And I'm not going to go into all the different types of porn, because that ain't a conversation for this little thing here. I don't want you to know. It's in my mind. I wish it was not. And it's just because of what I've had to deal with. So anyway, there are different aspects of this that need to be discussed. This is definitely, I love Kelly's clarification on that. This is not a yes or no conversation. This is, because yes could mean 1,000 different things, right?
A
Yeah.
wise woman told me one time, it doesn't matter what you've done in your past. What matters is how you're behaving in your future.
Yeah.
And that's really important for us to remember, not to come from a judgmental standpoint, but to just understand, okay, what is it that we are dealing with as a couple, and how can we deal with it collectively?
Right.
And then Jonathan has something as well.
So I'm a massage therapist, and one of the courses that we took is on boundaries. And statistically, it's shocking to realize that statistically, 1 in 4 women have been sexually abused or molested, and 1 in 7, as far as they understand the statistics to be correct for men, because men don't come out as often, have also been abused or molested. And when you recognize that, there's going to be some sexual dysfunctions, some things that the person might even not even recognize they're doing or why they're doing it. But those are topics for conversation. What has gone on in your life that led you to behave a certain way, or have you dealt with issues in this regard? Because those are important things to know in a relationship.
Amen. Thank you so much. And definitely, I definitely agree with that it does not matter what your past is. It really just so does. I so believe in the atonement. I know that it is so real. But where you are right now and where you're headed is way more important than where you've been. Way more important.
Also, as far as like what he was saying, any kind of abuse, anything like that is going to make you extremely vulnerable to that topic. And so that's really important to get it out in conversation before you get married, because if you're married and then you bring up something so sensitive and you think they should take it more seriously than they're taking it or whatever, it's not. That's one of those things you don't want to find out after you're married, that he just thinks that's not really that big of a deal, or whatever.
Right. And thank you, Jonathan, for bringing that up. I did not mean to ignore that, because you are so right. I mean, the abuse factor is just so incredible. The numbers are just astounding. To have it does affect way too many people. So, and definitely that needs to be discussed. It has to be discussed. And
I like to suggest something. One of the things that we sometimes do is we want to think we can fix somebody. And I want to testify that we're not going to change. We're where we are, and we're probably not going to change very much moving forward. And when I can convert him or her, I can help him with that. That's taken on more than you really need to. So we're probably not going to change a whole lot. And if you find somebody that you like everything but, and you can fix that, you're not going to be able to fix it, because they haven't.
Thank you. Yeah, especially when it comes to any past abuses or whatever. Definitely, you're not going to fix whatever. Now, I do know, and we've been taught, that we do continue to evolve, change, if you will, but we do it in our own way and in our own time frame, and we can do that together. For instance, I've been doing a healing your family history type class, and what I've learned is in a marriage relationship or a couple dynamic, if one person moves, it's automatic that the other person will move with them or away from them. They'll choose one or the other. They kind of shift their behavior a little bit. That person's going to move with them or away from them. So let's say, for instance, that man comes home from work, and maybe you've had dinner and whatever, and there are just different feelings in that house, and the woman is expressing feelings of good feelings, positive feelings, vibes, whatever. He can feel that too. However, if there's negative feelings being expressed, he will either go toward that and join in those negative feelings, or repel them, or move away from them. Does that make sense? Hope that makes sense. So back to that whole feeling that we create in the home. Well, they'll either join us with that feeling, or they will go away from it. We decide how we feel. We each individually decide our reaction to things, or conversation in the way that we present that kind of feeling. Thank you, guys. You guys are awesome. I love the comments. All right. And then here's one that you guys might have some opinions on or want to discuss a little bit more. And should a couple's sexual relationship be kept completely private, or is it okay for one spouse to discuss aspects of it with friends, siblings, or parents? I have an opinion on that one.
I have a very strong opinion on that.
Thank you. What is your very strong opinion? Because I think we might be agreeing. Go
Keep your
ahead.
mouth shut. What happens
Amen.
in your
Amen. Amen.
relationship, keep it in your relationship.
Yes. You keep it within the bounds of that relationship, just as was it Brian was talking about earlier in the relationship attachment model. There's a level of trust there. There's a level of vulnerability. There's a level of that intimacy. You don't want to go and put a wedge in that. That does not need to be being talked to with your mama or your siblings or your daddy or whatever. No, your girlfriends don't need to know all that. You know, you keep that within you, between you two and the Lord. They're the only people need to know.
That goes back to that whole secret, sacred thing. I mean,
yes, right? It is a very sacred, special part of marriage. It does not need to be discussed outside of that relationship. Because I will tell you, you start doing that, it's going to put a wedge in that relationship. It will create a problem. You just don't go there. All right. And then just ask, is there anything you would like to tell me about any of your past relationships that I don't already know? You don't say that you think I should know or whatever, but just that I don't already know. Is there anything you'd like to tell me? Now, with that, I honestly do not feel like people should have to divulge everything if they do not feel comfortable in doing that. I really feel like each person should only divulge what they feel like they feel like is necessary to divulge for that relationship. Otherwise, you keep it in the past. That's my opinion. I have a strong opinion on that one. I'm like, I want to know the basics. How many times you've been married, how many relationships you've had, how many sexual partners you've had. That would be important to know. Okay? But as far as details of that, I don't need to know details.
What about past history of cheating? I mean, I know you said, obviously, we have faith in the atonement. Should you ask I don't know, should you ask sex outside of marriage? Should you ask just general questions like that, or?
Well, let's open that up to the group. Should someone divulge if they've had premarital sex, if they've had an affair? What do you guys think? What?
I think so.
Okay.
I definitely think so. If it's a serious,
yes.
relationship or marriage, absolutely. That should be talked about, just because when you marry somebody, you're carrying their issues too. You're both like helping each other, right?
Right. And
in order to do that effectively, you have to know certain things about that person that make up who they are. And before a marriage, you would maybe need to know that to have a firm idea of what you're taking on. Obviously, though, that gets kept between you and the person you're discussing it with. It's not a community project.
Right.
But
yeah.
Yeah, but I do believe that it does need to be discussed to an extent. You don't need to know every single little detail, but you definitely need to know, like the premarital sex thing, that needs to be talked about. Cheating, it does need to be talked about. Yes, there's the atonement, and that's great, and that's wonderful. If you have somebody, though, who has shown a regular, consistent, recent issue with that, then it needs to be discussed, just because it does.
Well, the other thing too is, if you're going to marry this person, at some point the family or somebody's going to bring it up. And if you haven't talked about it before, it could cause a real issue, in your marriage. And those are just things you want to address before you get married.
Awesome. Okay, anybody else?
I would be more
Yeah, I
concerned
want
about.
to say something.
Wait, Sarah, hold on. Sarah, go ahead.
I was just going to say I would be more concerned about affairs than I would premarital sex. I don't think I'd really be that concerned about someone who had premarital sex, but I would be definitely, it would be more of a red flag if they've had affairs.
Okay. Thank you. Awesome. All right, and then was that Heidi?
Yeah, that was me. I don't know how to say this. I don't necessarily know. I don't know how to say this. I'm nervous to say it. Like, so I think that some people are comfortable saying that they want to know how many sexual partners, or they want to know affairs and cheating, is because they've not experienced that. So me, on the other hand, I would not be comfortable sharing the amount of sexual partners, the number of sexual partners I've had. And I'm just being so honest about that. Because if the Savior, if he forgave me and he doesn't remember anymore, I'm taking a chance and a risk of being judged very harshly
Right.
by men. And so, not that, I mean, it is a part of my story, but this is a really sensitive topic for me. So, like, I don't even know when do I tell a man that I've never been married? I mean, to some men, as soon as I say that and I have 2 kids, they're done with me. Like, it's over.
Okay, so if you don't mind, I'm going to share a story about, I'll just say a family member because some of you know who it is. I'll tell you who it is. A family member of mine, she left the church when she was 16. Her parents went through a divorce, I think the year before then or whatever. She didn't really leave the church. She was going to church, but on the weekends, let's just say, she was hanging out with a crowd and partying, and a member of the church introduced her to alcohol and started drinking, and her first date was with a 28-year-old man, I think, when she was 16, and she experienced a date rape. After that, she felt like it just didn't matter how many people, how many men, it just didn't matter. She did meet a married man, and she had an affair, and she got pregnant, and she had an abortion, and then he broke up with her because he wanted to go back to his wife and his children, and he and then she kept on and kept on up until the age of and even like there was one time when she was living on her own in an apartment, and some guy broke in the morning, and early one morning, knocked on the door. I think it was around 7 or something, and she thought it might be the phone company or something. And she let him in, and she experienced another rape. And kept on continuing with her lifestyle. She had moved to another place because she was pretty much shunned at church where she was at. And when she was about 24, she called me, and she said, "Paula, do you think they'll let me come back to church?" I said, "Let you? We would celebrate you coming back to church." Now, I personally do not know how many sexual partners she had, and it does not matter. I love that woman. She's been through a bunch of crap. And to the man she's married to. When she was coming back to church, she went through a year of, I don't know what they call it, probation or whatever, where she was coming back, going through the repentance process. And she met her husband. I don't remember how they met. And she basically told him, I don't remember how many. Just know that I have a history and have been through some stuff. So Heidi, that can be your answer. Because you're right, it really doesn't matter. She went through it. They were married in the temple. They're still married today, and they've had 5 children together. And they are considered pillars in their ward. Great, strong, solid family. And just great people. So there is hope. There is an opportunity for people, no matter what their past is, to be able to experience the atonement and know how real it is. So I don't know if that helps you or not, but if and I know some of your history, and just know that it really doesn't matter as long as you're able to share enough that, say something like, I really don't remember. And it really doesn't matter. Just know that I've had a history. That's where I'm coming from.
I think another really important thing that may be helpful to you, Heidi, as well, is you don't have to tell anybody in great detail what's gone on. I think what's more important to talk about instead of a number is what your personal triggers are. Some of the things that you've experienced in your past that when they say or do something, it's going to take you into a dark place. Those are the conversations that you need to focus on, and not a number, because that number doesn't matter, sweet girl. Heavenly Father loves you and is proud of who you are, and don't you ever forget that.
Yeah. Sorry, I know I got a little personal there, but I agreed 100% with what Jennifer just said. Okay. Anybody else have any other comments on that one? Oh, man.
Thank you so much, guys. Thank you, Paula. Thank you, Jennifer. I do have a question for the men, and I know they don't have to answer it or not, but I'm just curious because I have not dated a member of the church, not because I don't want to, but because I've not been asked out by a member of our church. Would you date a woman in my situation? Never married, 2 kids, 2 different fathers.
All right, man. That question's for you. What do you guys think?
To me, it wouldn't matter. I would be more concerned about my relationship with you. If I connected with you and loved you, I would accept your kids, whoever they were, whoever their dads were. It wouldn't matter to me. My relationship with you would be the most important.
But he's mine, so just saying. Sorry. All right.
Thank you, Jim. I was fixing to say, we connected on the dance floor, Jim.
Okay, we got a Michael that has said, Heidi, your kids and history are not going to matter as a factual history. Thank you, Michael. I appreciate you saying that. Anyone else?
I'll just jump in and say, my ex, she was a convert to the church, and she joined the church like 3 months before we met. And, she had several sexual partners, and, it wasn't an issue because she had undergone that conversion, a true conversion, changing, who you are when you join the Church of Jesus Christ and, accept him as your savior and make those baptismal covenants. If you've truly had that changed, then your past doesn't matter, you know?
All right. Thank you. Any other comments?
Actually, Paula, can I chip in here for a second?
Oh, go right ahead.
Okay. I just want to clear up what I was saying. A lot of what I was saying is about, having somebody know that. That wasn't because I would need to know that about somebody else. I was more speaking that I would want whatever partner I have to know about my past for all the reasons I stated. You and I have talked at length about my past, and there are some things in there that, heaven forbid, if they were ever to come up, which is not an unlikely thing to happen in my life, I would want them to know what they're getting into, and I would rather that happen prior to marriage, just because.
Okay. So, right. So basically, I feel like it is. I love the question, the way that it's worded. Is, let me go back to that real quick. Is there anything you would like to tell me about your past relationships that I don't already know? Do you understand how that's worded? What would you like to tell me? So here's what I would like to tell you about my past relationships that you may not already know. And so that would be the best way to go about doing that. You share what you're open to sharing about, what you're comfortable with sharing about. So I love the different perspectives there. I totally love it. That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I appreciate the vulnerability. I really do. You guys are just great. Awesome people. All right. The next question is, do you have any past sexual history? If so, please tell me about it in a non-detailed way. And how has your past sexual history affected your feelings about sexual intimacy? So, again, don't need details, but how has it affected your feelings about sexual intimacy? Jim asked me a question when I shared the details of my last marriage and what happened with him and everything. And he asked me if that affected how I felt about men. And I thought that was a very valid question. It was a very good question because for some women it could have. For me, not so much. But for others it could have. So I thought that was a good clarifying question. I didn't have to go into details. I just let them know, the different things about that. So that was kind of already touched on when we were talking about the other. But basically, how the sexual history has affected your feelings about sexual intimacy is going to be a topic that you may want to discuss, especially if you've been had sexual partners before. Okay. The next question is, how do we show love to each other? And again, I think it's very important that you know that person's love language. Because if his is number one, physical touch, which is very common for men, and yours is receiving gifts, that may be like a little bit of a miss unless you two learn how to do that. Because if a woman's lowest score is physical touch, that might be some frustration for the man. If his number one is touch, I'm not saying that can't be worked out. I'm just saying that is something to be discussed. Questions or comments on that one? All right, this is going to be a huge question that will need to be discussed, and that is, how often do you expect sexual intimacy? I can't tell you how huge this is, but I would love to hear your comments. Anybody have anything you want to embellish on this question? Anything you feel your opinion is on this question?
It's huge. I'm just going to leave it at that.
Okay. It is a big deal, because if somebody thinks, oh, twice a year I'm good, and then somebody else is going, what about 2 or 3 times a week? You know what I mean? Or 2 or 3 times in a day, if you want to do that. That might be a bit much. But anyway, but you know what I mean? What was that?
There should be no expectation. Expectation, that mindset denotes, oh, there's a timeline or a set of standards that we need to follow. It should be an emotional exchange of love, and that comes from intimate conversation and intimate activities, and not from a timeline or a preset standard.
I understand what you're saying, and I appreciate that. But there are also certain people that they could say, well, I would like to have this. Look, it's not like, okay, let's do it on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, right? It's not like we're going to plan a schedule for it, right? But it's more like a thing of, this is what I would like. This is the way I see it. This is the way I envision our marriage, and being able to express this, something like that. And there's going to be things happen. There's going to be, different aspects of life that will change that up. But at least being able to discuss it up front, I think is good.
I think that goes back to the whole details are not, the devil's in the details, I guess, literally that time. But it's just in general, but I just am thinking of a friend that I had years ago. She got married a couple of times. Her second marriage was in the temple, and they split up on their wedding night. I have no idea. I never asked questions, but I can't help but wonder if it had something to do with intimacy, And so I think these things have to be discussed,
right.
At least in general terms. Not expectations like, I expect you in that bed 5 nights, whatever. You're not going to go there, but you, I don't, you're not going to put a timeline on it either, Jonathan. Or I'm sorry, is that right, Jonathan?
Right.
Yeah, but you at least have to talk about, frequently, not or
right.
in general terms.
Right. Any other comments on that? Okay.
This is new. This is that kind of thing kind of new to me, since I've never been married. I didn't know people put a limit on it. I didn't know that there are people who didn't want to do it every day. I mean, I have no clue that there are actually people who, like, that there are women, or even, I don't know, maybe there's some men who don't even like to do it as often. Like, I had no idea that was a thing.
Right. So that would just need to be discussed, just in general terms. Okay.
And that's exactly why, Heidi, because there are people who have no idea that somebody like me exists, or somebody like you exists, or or that everybody's not like me or you or whatever. So that's why all these things have to be discussed.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Now, this is another sensitive subject for some people. If I were to gain weight, would that affect our relationship? Would that affect our sexual relationship? If you were to say that, if I were to gain weight, or, whatever. For some women, they feel like because of their weight that nobody wants to date them originally, and for some men that could be true. For others, not so much. I've seen women and men both with that may be overweight that get married and have very happy marriage, and they're just awesome. So I think it just depends on the person, and if you're not connecting with that person, they're just not meant for you. But if you were married, so this is a question you're going to ask. If I were to gain weight, how would that affect our relationship? So keep that in mind.
Does that show insecurity, though, just in asking that? Because I mean, you're talking about these people who are paired up, who are some gorgeous looking person married to some huge blob, and you have no idea where the attraction comes from or whatever. But, I mean, people's opinion of themselves has a lot to do with it. Well, it has everything to do with it. And so if you're saying, well, would you still want to, have sex with me if I gain weight? I don't know. That just kind of seems like it's insecurity?
So I actually I was friends with a couple. No, I was friends with a woman. The wife in the marriage years ago, probably like 20, 30 years ago now. And she was married to a man that wanted her to stay at a certain weight. And if she went over that weight, he had her on some sort of diet. And they had like 4, 5, 6 kids and whatever, but she had to stay within that certain weight. That would have been a great question for her to ask. Because she was a very competent woman. But she could have asked, if I gain weight, how would this affect our relationship? And then he could have said, oh no, honey, you're going to stay at 128. That's it. You go over that, this is what I'm doing. She didn't know that till they were married.
You know, one of the things that I think we need to not discount here is that if you really love the person, if you really love them, what are you laughing about?
Shoot.
She what?
Jennifer said something sweet.
Oh.
Go ahead.
Okay.
And
Anyway, I think well, anybody where we are in life, all of us have either been in a relationship, been divorced, been widowed, or something. So we're not walking into this thing like we've never been there before. We're not walking into the bedroom like we've never been there before.
Right.
And so we have to, if we really love somebody, does it matter that they gain or lose weight? They aren't the same shape they were when you married them. And I promise you, none of us are going to start and end a marriage through whatever in the same physical shape. It just isn't going to happen. We may get sick, we may get fat, we may lose so much weight we look like a bone for whatever reason.
Yeah.
So I don't know how to, why we should even address that question.
It was just a suggested question from the list of 375 that I've got. There are some people, especially when they're younger, I feel like it's important.
Yeah, when you're younger. But I think life happens. Okay, for when you start young, you have no children, and there's this nice trim couple. What happens? You all know what happens.
But I totally agree with you. I totally agree with you that this is why that question needs to happen, because if someone were to ask you that question, your answer would be absolutely not. That wouldn't matter, right? But to someone else like my friend from years ago, that would have been an important question for her to ask him, because to him it did matter.
You also, though, you think you wouldn't have to ask somebody about the whole in sickness and in health thing either, because it's right there. Oh, if I get sick and I'm in a wheelchair and you have to feed me, are you going to divorce me? You wouldn't even think about asking that question. But you probably need to bring these type of things up just to see what the reaction is. Oh, yeah, I'm going to stay with you. I'll be fine with that. You just kind of feel each other out, maybe. I don't know. That's just thought.
I think at our age, well, of course, one of you are at my age, but when we're
Julie's age.
Yeah, when her age. I don't think there's anything wrong with asking those questions and let somebody think about that. Let's say I have, just say I had really, really high blood pressure, or I have serious diabetes. Well, the health risks related to that are very high. And so, I think we have to look at that. If I'm really severely overweight and I have diabetes or whatever, I might say, well, hey, you going to stick with me if I lose all my feet and whatever?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that I think whoever's asking the question, whoever's receiving the question really needs to think about that. And I think that should be kind of an early on thing. Does that make sense to anybody?
Hey, Jennifer?
I think what you're saying makes perfect sense. I just had a incident like 6 months ago. I met a very nice man. He was 70 and I was 55, and he just said, oh, you're a kid. You don't want to be a widow. You don't want to, this. So I think that too many times we make assumptions, that, oh, well, if we get together, then you're going to wind up having to take care of me, or you're going to bury me, and then, whatever. So I think that we don't need to make assumptions about things. I think it can go both ways. Instead of somebody who is older, or somebody who does have diabetes, or somebody who has health problems, just instead of just assuming, well, nobody's going to want to take care of me, so I may as well not even pursue it. Or in the other way, hide the health concerns. Or, it's just, I think every single thing we've talked about, it's just a matter of getting it out on the table.
Right. Jennifer, did you have a comment on that?
I did. I think maybe a less, I don't know, harsh question would be talk about what your health goals are going to be in the relationship. Because I think that you can be healthy and overweight. Like, you can eat healthy and be overweight. But if you talk about the health goals, you're not saying if, you're not putting it in an if-then situation. Like, Jonathan's extremely a healthy eater. I'm not there yet. Hopefully one day I'll get somewhere close. But for now, I know that he is a very strict person on his health. And that's something that I aspire to be. But if that's not something that I aspire to ever be, it would not work, because he is that strict. And so I think that that's an important discussion to have, but not a, if I gain weight or whatever. If we were to change how we view what our health and our relationship is going to look like, might be a softer question to ask.
Okay. Great suggestion. Love it.
Well, and I think also that we need to be mindful that we will all give the answer that we feel our intent will be, but until you're put in that specific situation, we really all don't know what we're going to do. We really don't know exactly how we're going to respond, because we're forever progressing, we're forever changing. And at the beginning of that relationship, marriage, to that man or that woman, that might matter. But then after a year or 2 years, and her giving birth to his child, or just intimate spiritual connection, changes that mindset, and they see them forever different. Like, they don't see them physically, they see them spiritually, or they see them in a different light. So in my heart, I could say, I would never ever do that to you. But in reality, I'm really not going to know until I'm faced with it.
Right. So then we can go to our next question. If physical attraction were eliminated, what would be left in our relationship? That would be a great question to ask there. If we eliminated just that aspect, what's left? And then also going back to the marital intimacy, there's a question here that suggested, it says, who should initiate marital intimacy? For some, they're okay with both the man and the woman initiating it, just whenever. There are others, kind of like Jonathan was saying, rather than putting a timing table on it. There are others that go, well, no, I expect the man to do it all the time, or no, I expect the woman to do it all the time. Whatever this is a conversation to have. How often you think we should say I love you to each other? So somebody's love language could be the words of affirmation, and they need to hear that more often than others. So that's an important conversation to have if that's the case. And then what would you need to feel wanted and needed sexually? What would you need? What turns you on sexually? What turns you off sexually? Those are conversations you're going to need to have.
How detailed are you going there?
When you are before marriage, you need to get into some details. I don't think you need great details, but you need some. You need something to build on. You need to know where each other's coming from. To know. I mean, for real, like if you know that the way somebody does something is going to turn you off, the way somebody talks or says something or whatever, then you're going to need to know. And most of us are going to know, like somebody said earlier, our triggers, to know what turns us on, what turns us off, what brings us closer, what we want, or what we feel like we need to feel that need, that want, that to be at that level of intimacy. I think that before, when you're exclusively dating, when you're engaged, whatever, have this conversation. Or maybe before you're engaged, to find out if you want to be engaged with this person. Whatever you feel like the timetable is. There's no timetable on this. It's just whatever you feel, whenever you feel like you need to have these conversations. This needs to happen. A lot of times people become sexually frustrated married because they did not have these conversations beforehand. And I think a lot of times, and this goes for men and women, they didn't talk about it because they're thinking, because, maybe we can work this out after or whatever, right? These are conversations that you need to have, so then you're both on the same page and you both know where each other's coming from.
Just not when you're driving to meet each other for the first time.
Amen. Amen, sister. Another question that for me is important is, what boundaries do you have when it comes to sexual intimacy? There are certain things I don't do. So you have boundaries within sexual intimacy. And then there are things maybe you do want to do or whatever, right? Like you need to have that conversation of whatever. And again, it's a turn off, turn on, whatever. But definitely those boundaries of what is acceptable. And again, that's all between you, them, and the Lord. That little triangle. Just keep it there. Keep it real. You, them, and the Lord. And then a couple other questions that they suggest is, how will you deal with one partner wanting it and the other not? And then how do you feel about showing affection in public, kissing, holding hands, etc.? I remember my first husband did not want to do the PDA thing, and I didn't know that. And oh, how that hurt me, because I was okay with that. He was like, nope, we can't touch. I'm like, okay. So, so that was a little different. I wish we had had that conversation beforehand. We should have had a lot of conversations beforehand. That's okay. But anyway, so those are a few suggested questions to ask. That came from, I don't even remember. Just there was an LDS author that I found a list of 375 questions, and that was the part for sexual intimacy that they suggested those questions come from. I think most of those questions need to be discussed, if not all of them. Having those discussions are going to be very important. What is going to be your boundaries? What are going to be your triggers? When we talk about those, we do need to do it in a way that is respectful, and that you can be at a point where you know this is going somewhere. This is not a conversation you want to have just getting to know somebody. Okay. And some of this, again, like last week we talked about, can be dripped on just a little bit at a time. All right. So you maybe within the first month you're talking about something you like, don't like, whatever. You're just bringing it up. It's not like you got to sit down and in one night answer all these questions. It's not like an interview, right? You're going to be just having these discussions over time, because you're going to put some time into building this relationship and learning each other to be able to have this wonderful marriage when you're married, so then you can get to know each other and have that beautiful part of your life there. Now, in the same token of those 375 questions, there were questions related to religion, to parenting, to money, to recreation, and to intimacy. It hit on all 5 of those. Great questions. I'll just plan to send you guys out that link, and you guys can ask those questions if you want to, reword them if you want to, whatever. It's just suggestions. But I do believe that those are very important conversations to have. So that is what I had for tonight. Does anybody have any other comments that you'd like to add to this? And then I'll tell you next week's topic.
Paula, I just want to thank you for addressing this. I feel like that we all needed to talk about it. I think that's why we ran as late as we did tonight, is because this is something that's so important to every one of us. We need to know that it's safe to talk about it with somebody. And I love that this group has gotten so intimate that we can share about, talk about this in a mature fashion. So I want to thank you for being brave to open up the forum to this. I love you, girl.
Oh, love you too. Thank you so much.
I have another thought. There's a book that I gave my kids when they got married, and then I've given it to lots of young couples when they got married. Can't remember the name of it or the author for sure, but it may have been the Ayers, but it was, and they were not ashamed. Something like that. It's an LDS book. Yeah, and so if you're having trouble, if you think that's too sensitive to talk to your person about these things, then you might read a book like that together.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So.
Well, cool. Well, thank you. You guys are so great. I appreciate you guys being willing to be vulnerable.
Yes.
Oh, did you want to say something?
I said thank you.
Oh, you're welcome, Carmen. Glad you got to join us. I'm so grateful that you spent.
Right now.
Okay. Thank you for sharing your Sunday evening with me. Next week, so we've covered the gist, the basics of our 5 topics, right? So next week, we're going to hit on a topic that I feel like is also important that a lot of people ask. And we're going to be talking about how to get out of your comfort zone to find the one. Okay? So that's next week's topic. How to get out of your comfort zone. How to, kind of get away from that just a little bit and and how to find the one. Okay, so that will be next week's topic. I look forward to talking to you guys about that. And I love you guys. I think you're awesome, and I appreciate you sharing Sunday evening with me, especially for 2 hours. You guys are awesome. Talk to you later next week. Love ya.